When you think of the company Urban Outfitters, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Probably for some, it's the festival type clothing or clothing that's kind of, more hipster aesthetic, and the high price tags that these clothes tend to have. Or maybe you think about the fact that the company is founded and owned by an uber conservative Republican white man who is 76 years old. And perhaps you also think about the controversies and scandals that have happened over the years. Well, whatever your thoughts are on Urban Outfitters, today we're going to look into this corporation more closely and just see a little bit more about the corrupt practices and honestly just strange products that they have sold. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Urban Outfitters was founded as the retail store Free People by Richard Hayne, Judy Wicks, and Scott Belair in 1970 as a project for their entrepreneurship class at University of Pennsylvania. It was later renamed to Urban Outfitters, and in 2023, there are now 700 stores across the United States, as well as about 20 other countries, including Pakistan, Denmark, Italy, and France. As the company grew in size, it also grew in controversy. Throughout the years, there have been countless scandals that have caused the public eye to pay a little bit more closer attention to this retailer when before they may not even have really batted an eye. After all, it was, just a retailer for, kind of the younger crowd, and they sold, trendy clothes and trinkets and things like that. But once the media kind of dived into some of the scandals of Urban Outfitters, it's kind of hard to really look at it the same way. And like I said before, Urban Outfitters sells clothing that skews to a younger demographic. Think about like high school age to maybe 20s. And when I was in my early 20s, I actually really liked shopping at Urban Outfitters. I kind of had more of like the hipster vibe going on. So like the party, festival type clothing, that wasn't really my aesthetic, but they did, have like sweaters and cardigans and jeans that I really liked and thought were pretty cute. And, at the time I was a waitress and in school and didn't have a lot of money, so I didn't shop there very often. But, every once in a while they would have good deals, or like clearance items that I could actually afford. But I remember learning about some of Urban Outfitters' strange, products that, came out. And the one that really got to me was their pro-anorexic shirt that said "Eat Less." And the shirt was worn by a model who's incredibly skinny. And honestly, when I saw this shirt, it put a really bad taste in my mouth, and I just stopped shopping there and really have never been back. I don't really go to the mall too much either, and when I think of Urban Outfitters, I honestly think of, the high price tags and like kind of the trendy styles, but also I think about, how it's in a mall. And yeah, I just don't really like going to malls too much anymore, but I was curious to see what all has been going on since I stopped shopping there. And I stopped shopping there, gosh, I'm like 30, so almost like 10 years ago. So I wanted to see if anything has changed. And honestly, that Eat Less shirt is really just like, it's barely the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there has been so many more troubling products and adverts that have made Urban Outfitters honestly kind of infamous for controversy and also not learning from their mistakes and just doing the same thing over and over again. So let's get into some of that controversy now. Why don't we start with racism? A very good place to start. Urban Outfitters seems to have quite the knack for selling products that have blatant racist and anti-Semitic themes. Not to mention a whole bunch of just cultural appropriation. In 2004, Urban Outfitters, they released a t-shirt reading "Everyone Loves a Jewish Girl," with images of a shopping bag and dollar signs on the t-shirt. And it was eventually redesigned so that the offensive graphic elements were removed when the Anti-Defamation League complained that the shirt was promoting the stereotype that Jewish people are obsessed with money. But why this shirt even needed to exist in the first place is beyond me. Then, a few years later, in 2008, Urban Outfitters repeated history when they sold a men's t-shirt with anti-Israel messaging portraying an armed Palestinian youth accompanied by the word victimized. And this shirt was incredibly racially insensitive, but it was also very ignorant because it was referencing child soldiers and just very much not taking into account that this, war that's been going on back then and still now today affects so many people, and it's not something that needs to be on a shirt where a big box company can profit from it. People have died, and not just soldiers, but innocent civilians have been impacted as well. And so I just don't understand why this needed to be a shirt. I mean, just to be quite frank, I just don't get why it needed to exist in the first place. Another example of something that should have never existed in the first place is ghetto-opoly. And I hate that word, ghetto. It's an awful word. It, has a lot of negative connotations. I always think of, I think it was Alyssa Edwards on RuPaul's Drag Race who said that ghetto is a place, not a person, so you shouldn't, call someone ghetto. And this ghetto-opoly is a knockoff Monopoly game that is just so incredibly racist and also just an inaccurate display of African American culture. It's just not accurate whatsoever, and it's also just incredibly offensive. The game is, it's like Monopoly, but they changed, some of the properties that you can purchase. So they have like Cheap Trick Avenue and Hernando's Chop Shop. And yeah, it's just incredibly racist, but also really stupid. It's just a dumb concept. It just doesn't need to exist. Several Black leaders stood in protest to the racist rendition of this board game. And the entire concept, like I said, it never needed to exist in the first place. Finally, we have the Navajo hipster panty, which is a combination of words I never thought I would say. In 2011, Sasha Houston Brown, a member of the Sioux Nation, demanded that Urban Outfitters pull its line of Navajo labeled clothing and accessories. And not only is it cultural, appropriation and also very racially demeaning, but it's also illegal. You can't just put Navajo, on items of, clothing, products, or whatever that wasn't actually, curated by someone of Navajo descent, someone who isn't a part of the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Nation actually holds 12 trademarks on the word Navajo. And in 1990, a federal law passed that prohibits falsely suggesting that products were made by indigenous people when they actually weren't. And so the fact that this was selling, and it wasn't just these panties, there were other products that were, Navajo inspired, and some of them were like straight copies of the textiles or artwork or whatever, and just, they upped the price and then sold it. Last but not least, we have the New Mexico Cleaner Than Regular Mexico t-shirt. And I don't even know what to say about that one. That one just sort of speaks for itself. It's a ridiculous sentiment and inaccurate, once again, and also just plain racist. And honestly, there are tons of other examples of just obviously racist products that were sold at Urban Outfitters stores. But for the sake of time, we're going to move on to the next controversy. The next controversy has to do with the appropriateness of the products that they're selling, considering that the largest demographic that shops at Urban Outfitters is young men and women around the age of 18 to 24 years old. And then the second largest demographic is the under 18-year-old crowd, so children. And with that in mind, you would expect that the company would be mindful of, the products that they're selling to minors, and that there would be some level of concern or awareness. But if you guessed that Urban Outfitters didn't really care and just sold whatever, you would be right. I talked already about the Eat Less t-shirt that they were selling, which is incredibly toxic to be advertising that type of message to teenage girls. But of course, there is a lot more that Urban Outfitters, promotes. And one of those is slogans on their t-shirts that are incredibly offensive, such as slogans that say, "I vote for vodka," "USA drinking team," and "I drink, you're cute." And again, this is for people who are probably not the legal drinking age, but also, even if you are the legal drinking age, do we need these shirts? Is it really necessary? I mean, if you're like, of the legal drinking age and you want to wear these type of shirts, you go for it. But just knowing that their main demographic of people are under 21 is just like, why would you sell those things? It just doesn't make any sense. In September 2014, Urban Outfitters sold a fake blood-splattered t-shirt called the Vintage Kent State sweatshirt for $129, which is a ridiculous price tag. But even more ridiculous is the fact that they sold this in the first place. If you're not aware of why this is insensitive and highly inappropriate, basically, here's why. So in the 1970s, 4 unarmed students were shot and killed by the Ohio National Guard during a Vietnam War protest. And the tragedy was named the Kent State Massacre. So why would anyone want to reference this incredibly sad tragedy on a sweatshirt and sell it for $129? Like, it makes no sense. But what's even more troubling, once again, is that this shooting that happened, this super tragic shooting that happened, and it's being referenced on this sweatshirt, and could possibly be bought by a teenager. And you may be aware that in the United States, we have a school shooting epidemic. It is something that is horrible. As a teacher, I'm always worried anytime I see it on the news. It makes me frustrated. It makes me sad. It makes me scared. And why you would want to put this on a sweatshirt makes no sense. And imagine a teenager wearing it, maybe not even understanding the reference. And, they're in high school and they're very aware about, school shooters. We have to do, school shooter and, intruder drills. And so I just don't get why, one, this, sweatshirt needed to be made in the first place. Two, why we're charging $129 for a sweatshirt. And three, why would you push this product knowing how young your demographic of buyers are? It just does not make sense to me. But it isn't only the age inappropriate outfits that Urban Outfitters is selling that is problematic. It's also the fact that in 2011, the company came under fire for the treatment of Haley Clausen, who was only 15 at the time. And Haley is a model, and she filed a $28 million lawsuit against the company. According to the lawsuit, a photographer snapped a blatantly salacious picture of Haley in short leather shorts with her legs spread, and she was sitting on the back of a motorcycle. And the photographer allegedly agreed not to release the photo after the modeling agency complained that it was obviously way too sexual, and it's a child. The model is a child. And the photographer released the photo anyway, and Urban Outfitters used the photo in one of their advertisements. And I'm not going to include the photo to protect her dignity, so I'll just sort of describe why this photo was so wildly, inappropriate. Like I said, she's only 15, and the focus point of the shot is, mainly her, her crotch area. And not only was it, an obvious, over-sexualization of a minor, but also she did not give consent, nor did the modeling agency give consent for this photo to be released for commercial use. And the whole situation is just so gross, and I really do feel so badly for Haley, and I hope that she's doing well today. There's a lot to look into when it comes to Urban Outfitters and all their different shady practices, but I want to focus on one more area of concern, and that is stealing designs. Big companies do this all the time, but Urban Outfitters has a proclivity for ripping off artists' work and just selling it as if it was their own. And some of these examples include the time they stole a design of an indigenous artist's painting, and they basically took the image and made it into a outdoor rug and sold it. Another designer, an artist, had his design ripped off and made into a skirt without his consent. And then Urban Outfitters got its hands on an Etsy seller's jewelry line and began selling those in stores as well. In conclusion, is Urban Outfitters corrupt? That depends on what you value and what you believe is right and fair for a company to do, and your views on a company's responsibility about what they sell and also who they sell to. Like I said before, I stopped shopping there in my early 20s because I found that Eat Less shirt to be not only incredibly toxic, but also just kind of stupid. I honestly sort of outgrew a lot of the aesthetics that Urban Outfitters was pushing, and I just didn't see myself, my beliefs, my interests represented in the store. And so subjectively, I personally find the store to be a bit vapid, definitely overpriced, and also offensive. It's offensive to my sensibilities, very offensive, not only the incredibly, racist things that they sell there, but also the fact that they rip off people's art, and the fact that they, sell these, cultural appropriated items at hugely inflated prices. And, it's not their work. They should not be allowed to do that. And so I personally, I'll never be shopping there again. And objectively, between, the lawsuits and, the scandals that have occurred over the years, I think from an objective point of view, you can also make a case that, honestly, I think Urban Outfitters, they can take a rap on Urban Outfitters. I think we can be done with the store. So with all that being said, I hope that you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed this deep dive into this company that's been around for quite a while. And I'm thinking in the next couple years, it's going to start, declining, and we won't see as much Urban Outfitters. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Please keep it civil. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. It helps me out tremendously. And with all that being said, thank you and have a wonderful week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me. It's goodbye for now, but I hope to haunt you again soon.